The rudest awakening I ever had in my career was I wrote 2 books. I was in Barron's Top 100 in all categories. I was on the cover of magazines. And I just kept thinking along the way that when I do this, the phones are going to start ringing. I was on TV all the time. I'd be on the Fox affiliate. I'd come back to my office and I'd just wait for that phone to ring. It never did. I had to have this rude awakening. It helped have credibility because like you've got your YouTube channel. At the time, you could have Googled Erin Botsford and you'd have to scroll 52 pages before you ran out of Erin Botsford because I had all this marketing stuff. So I had lots and lots of credibility, but all that marketing stuff in the world never brought me one client. That's the truth.
So welcome back to another session of Coffee with Delzi, and the third session with our guest, Erin Botsford, a 60-minute conversation delivering insights and best practices from industry experts and your peers from around the country to help bring the espresso to your practice. I'm your host, Matt Delzingaro, or Delzi for short, and thank you all for joining today. And back by popular demand, we received so much great feedback, if you will, around the prospecting session that Erin did. And she only scratched the surface, if you will. And right. And a lot of you guys knew man, doesn't she have 10 different prospecting methods? Can't she share more? So what do? We asked Erin to come back and share some of her other favorite methods because she doesn't have a favorite, Erin. It's more to the personality of the advisor. So welcome back to the show, Erin and Mike and Blake. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
So for folks who missed the previous 2 sessions with Erin, she is the star. She's a top 100, Barron's top 100 for a reason. I just want to show you where to get those recordings if you did miss it. So folks, if you go into YouTube, this is where I house all my videos. I don't promote it or anything like that. I just make it easy for my advisors to go and review. But you could see these are all my previous recordings from my previous guests. And I have to tell you, the 2 sessions, this one down here, how to Barron's top 100 advisor closes any size prospect, anytime, anywhere in just one appointment. That was our first session with Erin. And then the second session was on prospecting. And we're just going to go into more detail and more on different strategies with Erin. Just go into YouTube. You could put in @Coffee with Delzi and you'll find all my recordings like that. All right, folks. Just a brief introduction. If you don't know who Erin is, she's a Barron's top 100 advisor. She's been named to that list multiple times over her career, which means that she's one of 100 advisors that named to this list over 500,000 advisors across the country. Sold her practice, her $1 billion practice, after 31 years back in 2017. And now she runs what she calls the Elite Advisor Success System. It's an advisor modeling system. It's not a coaching system, and it helps advisors take their business to the next level. So welcome back, Erin, and I'm excited to do this again. So Erin, we're going to talk about prospecting today, right? And some various techniques that you used. And it wasn't, you had no magic bullet. You were probably the least, I would have named you out of 30 advisors in a room, all these rookies. And I would say, with your background, no family, you moved 17 times over your career with your husband being a pilot and served. You never were ingrained into the community where for years, like many of these advisors, they just set up shop in the middle of their neighborhood that they grew up in and they have all friends and families to go to. You had none of that. Before we dive into that though, I want you to talk a little bit about the importance of continuing to prospect, because the market being up and having the greatest bull market since basically 2009, a lot of advisors I have found are complacent. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of these advisors are eventually going to sell their practice or pass the torch, if you will. Why is it so important for advisors who have a massive business, right? But it's all them. Why is it so important for them to continue prospecting?
Prospecting is an art form. And I remember, I think for some reason, I thought that I would only have to prospect for 7 years. I don't know who told me that. I don't know what happened, but the hard thing is when it's like keeping up when you're weight training. Most of these guys are probably guys, you go to the gym, you build muscle. And if when you first start doing weight training at the gym, you come home and you're really sore and all that stuff. But as you continue to build muscle and you continue to do it, one, you get better at it, and two, it's not so painful, right? So you don't, the 50th time you go and work your legs, yeah, you're a little bit sore, but it's not like that first time. And so in order to keep your practice toned, like we keep our bodies and keep it growing, you just got to continue to prospect because clients get older, they die, the money goes off the books. There's lots of different reasons that you just got to keep filling the pipeline and having new blood come through your system, because otherwise a company that's not growing is effectively dying. The minute you stop prospecting, you've decided that you're ready to die. That's just the end of the story. And so now then it's just a matter of time. It's like a human body, right? The minute you quit feeding it, the minute you quit building it, you just basically issue this death sentence. It's the same thing for a practice. So it is issuing the death sentence. When you quit prospecting for your next clients, you're done.
So it's funny. I want to make sure we're clear on this because I think through my travels, often I'm asking, are you in growth mode, maintain mode, or are you just in startup mode? And that's how I talk to my advisors is how can I help grow or maintain or make best practices, if you will. And the often thing I hear is like, when I hear they're in growth mode, I'm like, great, you're prospecting, things like that. What are you doing? They're like, I got my website, I'm sending out a newsletter. And I'm like, wait a second, that's marketing. That's not prospecting. So can you real quickly tell us the difference between marketing and prospecting? Because I think there's a huge confusion in this industry.
Yeah, and again, all this is my opinion based on my experience. And so to me, marketing is something that you can outsource. You can hire people to do your website. You can hire people to write. You can buy newsletters from horse's mouth. There's a lot of things that you can do to market. Prospecting typically involves human interaction of some sort, right? So because your buyers are human beings, right? And they typically, unless they're going to go to Schwab or work with some kind of AI, whatever, they want human interaction. After all, what they're intending to do is turn over their life savings to somebody or some entity. Typically, they don't want to turn it over to a faceless entity. They want to look at you, Delzi, and say, can I trust you with my life savings? This represents countless hours of work. I've been working since I was 11 years old, and now I'm 65. They want a human being at the other end of that transaction. And what are you going to do? They're not going to magically find you. Delzi, the biggest awakening, the rudest awakening I ever had in my career was I wrote 2 books. I was in Barron's Top 100 in all categories. I was on the cover of magazines. And I just kept thinking along the way that when I do this, then the phone's going to ring off. The phones are going to start ringing. I was on TV all the time. I'd go down and I'd be on the Fox affiliate, Fox Business News affiliate, right down the street in Addison, Texas. I'd come back to my office and I'd just wait for that phone to ring. It never did. Now, it helped, and I had to have this rude awakening. It helped have credibility because like you've got your YouTube channel. At the time, you could have Googled Erin Botsford and you'd have to scroll 52 pages before you ran out of Erin Botsford because I had all this marketing stuff. I'd done all this stuff. So I had lots and lots of credibility, but all that marketing stuff in the world never brought me one client. Okay, that's the truth. So it was my external efforts, my being out there, my doing what I did that brought in prospects, and then I closed the deal.
So let's start from the beginning of what and how you prospect, because I think it's a lot of based on your past story. So can you share with the folks that weren't on the previous call, like a little bit about your backstory and your why? Because I think that is the most important thing when a new client comes in or a prospect comes in and they're like, okay, who was Erin Botsford? You have a why story, right? So what was your why?
Yeah, and now I teach advisors. I've trained over 1,400 advisors in the last 4 or 5 years. And I tell them the most important thing you can start off with, everybody needs a founder's video. And because what you want to do is be able to tell your backstory and clearly articulate your why, but you want to do it short and succinct and you don't want to screw it up. Because the problem advisors have is they know they need to tell a little bit about myself to gain trust or whatever. They have this idea they need to do it, but they go in and they talk about themselves. They talk about something crappy that happened to them. They talk you, and which is what you want to do. You want to talk about something that happened in your life, because in our culture, overcoming adversity is both appreciated and applauded. And then you want to show how you came out of it, and that circumstance or that hero's journey led you to this profession. You want to do that. The problem is, and believe me, I've read a lot of advisor stories because I ask them to write their story and then turn it into a video. And oh my gosh, I'm like, this is awful. So that's the reason your first impression with a prospect is you do want to tell your story via video so that you can't mess it up. Because what ends up happening, Delzi, is you end up talking too much about yourself, or you talk about my first divorce and then my second divorce, and then I stayed home to raise my kids, and then I did this, and it's like all you did was now just show bad judgment. So it is important to tell your story, people, very important, like key, but get a video done. We had so many bad stories coming in that were like, oh my God, I would never hire this person because they showed such poor judgment. We actually have an internal writer, and our writer writes the stories for our advisors, and then she helps them get a videographer and all that stuff. But so my story was, my dad died when I was 11. Left my mom with 6 kids, no money. We went from middle class to destitution, really. So I bought everything I've ever owned since I was 11. I was in a terrible car accident when I was 16. I went through a criminal trial, a civil trial. I was brought through the ringer. I was found not guilty. It was a mess. But I remember my mother telling me, honey, I can't help you. You're going to have to do everything on your own. My husband, Bob, noticed me in high school, and he asked me to marry him. And of course, the bride's parents are supposed to pay for the wedding. We had no money. We didn't have money to eat, let alone pay for a wedding. I really was, after everything I'd been through with this trial and all this crap, I still was relatively ingenious. And so I found out that Wheel of Fortune was doing tryouts for Brides Week. So I went up, I tried out, I got on the Wheel of Fortune and I won. The final puzzle I solved was down in the dumps. When I was around 20, I had $22,000 I had saved through my winnings and my savings. And so I bought a condo with it, took $3,000, bought a condo with a friend of mine at age 20. And then we got married at 21. I paid for the wedding. And then we turned our life savings over to a stockbroker. It was $19,000. And within 6 months, he lost all of it for us. I always tell people, by the time I was 22, I had a PhD in the School of Hard Knocks. It really was what led me to this business, because I think it's interesting. We have a lot of advisors that I will say sometimes their attitudes are a little bit cavalier. Oh, this is easy. And especially in the last, let's say 12 or 15 years, the markets have just gone up. But what's not easy about this business? You just throw your money in the market does its job. You haven't gone through a 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, or a 2008 financial crisis. And those things are coming, right? It's just a matter of time. So the question is, what kind of business do you really have that will sustain a 2 to 3 year downturn like we've had before? It really, again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So you better have a good marketing machine, because when your AUM, when your revenues go down 30% and you still want to keep your staff and you want to keep your office space, you still need to have a pipeline of prospects coming in the door. That's what I've learned.
Folks, if you guys, I feel bad for the folks who didn't see the first 2 sessions, because especially the first one, because it's a lot of psychology here with what Erin does with her prospects when they walk in the door, and the founders video and where they sit. There's a lot of intention, right? It's not just willy-nilly. And she learned a lot of this around the mindset that the advisor you met in that training one day, right? And I think that's where it all started, right? Because Erin, you told me that you didn't believe, or you didn't even imagine how big of a practice you could build, because you didn't even know, right? So how important was it when you ran into Paul and what Paul shared with you, and it just completely flipped your mindset and how you thought about this business?
Yeah, I was struggling advisor. I enrolled in a business coaching program. The 3rd session, I ran into a guy and I was really happy. I'd gone from 300,000 to 400,000 in 3 years. I was like, wow, that's great progress. And then this guy tells his story. He went from 300,000 to 3 million, 3 million in 3 years. I was like, oh my God, where have I been? Did I miss a coaching session? So I got to spend literally one day with this man. And I realized that he had a completely different framework, different mindset than I did, meaning he actually thought like a business owner. And I was not. So I had a practice. I did not have a business. And on the way home, it's interesting, Delzi, with my students, we just did a book study on this book called The E-Myth Revisited, which I highly recommend for anybody. I think it looks like this now. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It should be everybody's business Bible, because you read that, you will have a aha awakening moment about what it is that you really have. And some of the things that Paul and I talked about is typically other businesses typically hire other people to do the actual work of the business. We gave examples like a dentist, like when was the last time your dentist actually cleaned your teeth? The answer is never. They hire people to do the maintenance work of their businesses. And in our industry, that message, somehow the memo just never got to us, because we end up doing all the maintenance work, which is client reviews. So I spent one day with Paul. I came back, I had one part-time assistant who was 20 years old. I was sharing her with 4 other guys. I said to my branch manager, I want to have her full-time, I'll pay for her. And I went to her and I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to go out and bring in prospects, and you're going to do everything else. And fortunately for me, she was young and naive. She's okay. So that's the backstory. And so a couple of years later, I did 3 million, then 4 million, then 5 million. And I really started running a company, a business. And I got very clear, very intentional on, Paul helped me picture, what do I want to have happen on the last day that I'm in business? And I was very clear on what I wanted to have happen on that last day. And once you're clear on the outcome that you're looking for, then the steps to get there come relatively easy, because you find resources. Like for right now, Delzi, I'm a resource for a lot of advisors. Like I said, like 1,400 in the last couple of years. And what they do as a resource, I just give them my playbook and say, here's the exact steps. Don't deviate. Don't question it. You can question it, you can do whatever you want. You can go off and try other things, but I've typically tried that, figured out it didn't work, and come back, right? So I'm really grateful. I get to be that resource for a lot of advisors who are sick of trying to figure it out all on their own. They just want the model. They want to have it run on autopilot, and they want to end up selling their company someday for a decent price.
Which is amazing, is that to get top dollar for your price, if you are going to eventually sell your practice, the practice can't be based on one person, right? And I think
Right.
That's the mistake our industry makes. And I think that's what was the awakening Paul showed you, right? Having 7 different conference rooms, having 2 different locations, all that.
Yeah.
So let's get into some different prospecting methods. So what ones did you find? What were your favorites? And then what are some others that you could share with the folks who joined us for this call today?
Sure. I love the topic of prospecting, is one of my favorites, but I want to back up a little bit, Delzi, and talk about some psychology in that from your marketing to your prospecting, everything needs to be aligned. Now, from the previous, I think it was the first call we did together, and that is, in order to get a prospect to move forward and say yes to you, what I found is you have to create a triggering event in their minds. And so most advisors know what these triggering events are. They know that a triggering event might be somebody's getting married, somebody's getting divorced, somebody's changing jobs, parents have died, they're getting ready to retire, they have a grandkid. Those are triggering events. The question is, which one of us wants to wait around for those things to happen? So what you want to do, first of all, in your marketing is you want to have your marketing messaging creating these triggering events in people's minds. And then, for instance, let's say you're having a seminar. So I teach 10 different ways, things that I did to bring in high quality prospects. I'll back up a little bit more and say what you have to do, first of all, is identify who your ideal prospect is. So I tell my students, I give them a checklist of things and they write down, and I say, limit it to, we call it 3 personas. Like your ideal prospect might be a small business owner. It might be a senior level executive at a Fortune 500 company. It might be widows. It might be divorcees. It might be professional athletes. You want to, write out who that person is, what they look like, where they spend their time, all of that stuff. And the reason you want to do that is so that you don't waste time. So if your prospect is a business owner, you're probably not going to find business owners at retiree workshops or out on the golf course in the middle of the day. A business owner is at his business, right? So point being, you want to know who your prospect is, and you want to go only to places or use your marketing efforts at places where they're going to be. So you need to identify, and it's interesting because advisors make up stories about, I'm going to go support this charity event because I think all my prospects are going to be there. Really? Your prospect is a professional athlete. You think they're really going to be at this women's charity event? There's just no alignment but they feel like I'm doing something, and maybe there'll be somebody there for me to meet. It's like, there might be, but are they part of your ideal client? Is that one of the personas? It's just, there's no congruence between what they're looking for and where they spend their time. So you want to have that ideal prospect, then your marketing messages need to disturb them. That's what I teach, is that as long as prospects, if you excuse the term, as long as they're fat, dumb, and happy, they don't see any reason to engage with you or seek out your advice. So what you need to do, and most advisors, they focus on the investment side, the retirement side of the balance sheet. Even when they meet with their prospects, they talk about their manager selection process, their investment philosophy, their Callan charts, their this. What I did was I focused on this side of the balance sheet, which is the risk side of the balance sheet. So all of my marketing was going to point to potential risk. What could happen that could ruin your day, your chance for a nice, comfortable, wonderful retirement? What could possibly go wrong? Because the other thing is in marketing and in prospecting, you need to ask questions. Giving information, the tax code has changed. Really? Who gives a darn? Who cares? But what's it going to mean to you when this happens, right? So from your marketing messaging, then to your prospecting messaging, it needs to align. So I'll have students that come to me and they continue, like they're doing seminars or webinars, and they'll buy a canned webinar from some webinar training company that ends up all you're doing is sharing information. The information doesn't create a triggering event in the prospect's mind. They just wasted their time. They came and said, thank you for the dinner, or thank you for the information. I'm going to go on my merry way. It's just a recipe for disaster. Now, when I was in practice, it was awesome because I was always in very competitive situations. And I knew my competitors they're going to go blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to come in and disturb the hell out of people. And I always won. And so I don't know why that whole messaging never got to our industry, that you can't sit there and regurgitate information. People can get information online. They don't need you for information. They need you to point out, and I talk about exposing weaknesses in the non-financial side of their business, the non-investment side, especially as you move up market, Delzi. High net worth people, especially, are very risk averse. And I started off, my first client gave me $50,000. I remember thinking, oh my God, $50,000. By the end, they were giving me $50 million. I was working with very high-end people. As you move up market and you work with high net worth people, you understand they have some attributes. And Blake, maybe you can bring up the slide that talks about the 5 attributes that I figured out of high net worth prospects. One of them is they're very risk averse. Another is they don't like surprises. They don't want to be blindsided. And high net worth prospect also, they don't need you to manage their money. They just want to protect the downside. They've already made their money. They just don't want to lose it. So over here on the investment side, there's only a margin of what you can do for them. But on the risk side, you want to be able to go in there and talk to them in your marketing, in your prospecting about, do you have a lake house? How is the lake house titled? A lot of times the lake house will be titled in their own personal names. You're like, what could possibly go wrong? Well, if you have a lake house, you probably have a boat. If somebody gets injured on a boat and they sue you, okay, if that lake house is in your personal names, then you're going to be sued not only for the value of the lake house, but you're going to expose every other asset in your personal name. So thanks, Blake, for doing that. So high net worth people, you need to be aware of what triggers them, what drives them. They're very risk averse. They don't like surprises. They don't want to be blindsided. They totally understand the concept of leverage. Okay. They typically feel grateful for their success, and they typically recognize their lack of financial planning knowledge. Okay. So on this one, most advisors want to move up market, but few understand the issues facing those more affluent clients. So thanks, Blake, on that. Also, interestingly enough, Delzi, high net worth prospects love your product. They love annuities. And I think that's always a really, for advisors like, what? I mean, they don't associate that, but an annuity takes X amount of risk off the table for these high net worth prospects, and they like them a lot. So again, whatever you decide to do. So the 10 ways, that we do, I did seminars. At one point, Delzi, I was doing 6 seminars a month. By the end, I was mostly getting referrals, but I also did, we call them drive-by shootings, I had terrible names for things, but it was stopping by small businesses and talking to the business owner. I did my out to lunch bunch. There was a lot of things. And so what I encourage advisors to do, and write this down, guys, you need to have 3 different types of prospecting activities going on all at the same time. And why 3? It's because prospects actually get to decide how they want to engage with you. You don't get to decide that. So some prospects want to see you at a distance. Maybe they want to see you giving a seminar or webinar or whatever. Some of them want to be introduced to you by a neighbor, a friend, a COI, a CPA, an attorney. But some, interestingly enough, some of the best prospects I ever ended up working with were people that I met socially. You're in a social situation, you're playing golf, you're at the club, and you're just meeting these people. Hey, would you like to have lunch sometime? And then I would take them out to lunch, and then I would end up turning them into prospects. And because, like you said, Delzi, I walked into Panama City, Florida. I didn't know one soul. Ended up moving to Dallas, Texas. I didn't know one soul. So how do I go into a community where I don't know anybody and end up creating prospects? And so a lot of times you casually meet people. Again, you take them out to lunch. There's a technique that I used at lunch because what I was looking for was the appointment with both husband and wife. So you really do want to have 3 different prospecting methods going on at the same time. It's not that hard. Again, I just give it to my students and say, do these 3 things in concert. Make sure your messaging in all cases is always the same. It's cohesive. Because like I was talking about, you can't do a seminar with a canned script that doesn't disturb them. You're talking about the S&P 500 and whatever you're talking about, and then you finally get the appointment, and then they come into your office, and they think you're going to talk about that which you talked about in the seminar, but now you're like, nope, we're going to talk about the risk side of the equation. It's just this incongruence in the messaging.
Yeah. So that's where I want you to focus a little more on, because I used to live on seminars. Like I wholesaling 25 years, and my gosh, the first 10 to 15 were nothing but seminars every week. My wife said, are you going to ever come home? Because every night I would be doing a seminar Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And now my wife said, are you ever going to go away? She said, what are you doing home tonight for dinner? Because no one's doing seminars. And so I think it's a lost art. And I don't know, what would you be doing if you were an advisor right now? Would you be doing seminars with the markets at all-time highs and interest rates, inflation, what's going on in the world? What would you be doing?
I would be doing webinar trainings like you and I are doing right now.
Okay.
Because what's really interesting is that because of COVID and everybody got used to doing Zoom calls and stuff, now you have no physical barriers, right? So you can have clients in Alaska at this point. You can do your first initial approach talk via Zoom. You can do every meeting via Zoom. Delzi, when it comes down to it, it still is a numbers game. And that's why seminars, or in this case, we're going to call them webinars, you will get the numbers. Now, again, there is an art form to how to engage them from the very beginning, how to keep them engaged. And it's all about stories, right? You don't pass on any information. It's not. And when I see some of the seminar scripts out there, I just want to put a pen in my eye. I'm like, oh my God, those kind of things are a colossal waste of time. So are the seminars where you pay for dinner and you have all these plate lickers show up. So I never paid for a dinner. The most I ever served was water, tea, or cookies when I was doing seminars in person. But now I would never do that. Literally, it's free. So why would you not, knowing that it's a numbers game, when what you want to do is open up with a bang, which open up with a bang is a story. Okay. Instead of saying, hello, everybody, welcome to tonight's seminar. Tonight, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. No, that is just old school. You open up with a bang. You use 3 of these disturbing tracks. which are stories. I want to tell you a story about this, 3 stories, and then you close for the appointment. It doesn't have to be an hour long. It can be 30 minutes long. It doesn't, this can be, but what you have to do is disturb them out of their slumber. Okay? You have to, it's got to awaken them to, oh my God, I thought everything was fine. And maybe it's not. And most of the things you focus on, again, is in the non-investment side of the balance sheet. So how much umbrella liability insurance do they have? Oh, none? Okay, so what if their teenage kid is off at college and he happens to hit a plastic surgeon? It's interesting. We used to have a joke. After everything that I went through, we had to make things into a joke, but it's actually better to kill them than maim them. You better hope you kill them and don't maim them. But the point being is, car accidents are the most common event that end up wreaking havoc on a person's financial situation. It's unbelievable the number of people who have no umbrella liability insurance or are grossly underinsured, and they have teenage kids off at college driving cars in their own name. That's the easiest disturbing track. And then the other thing to know about a seminar is you don't give them the answer. Even when you're meeting with your prospects, you point out these issues and they'll say, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about it? If we work together, we can get that fixed. So another problem we see is so often advisors want to look smart and they want to give the answers. Yeah. If you're going to give them all the answers, why would they hire you? So open with a bang, 3 disturbing tracks and a close, and you're done. And you're going to hit people at a time, either and especially, how did they get there? What does your invitation sound like? Your invitation has to ask a question. So yeah, with the market at all-time highs, what could possibly go wrong? With an election coming, we're here in election year, what could possibly go wrong? What happens next? Again, you don't want to it's got to ask a question to get them thinking about, well, I don't know what happens next. Do you know what happens next? They want to know if you know what happens next, because again, a lot of people in the last 15 years, with the markets just going up, they've gotten very complacent. And on the other hand, everybody has this, it feels a little weird. Things feel a little off. Maybe things, aren't, what you only have to look at $33 trillion in government debt and you realize that things could fall apart in like a nanosecond. So
there's a perfect scenario of a question, right?
There's a perfect question.
We're paying $1 trillion in debt every year and or interest, and what could go wrong, right?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Can't imagine.
So the psychology is everything with you, right? Yeah. And with these seminars, with your out to lunch bunch, it seems like you have one key to your secret sauce, right? And that I'm assuming it's never meet with a married couple, just one of them, always meet with 2 of them. So I guess the question is, how do you get to that point? You go out to lunch with the wife or you go out to lunch with the husband. How do you get them to agree if you don't talk about business over your lunch at the lunch bunch, right? That's one of your keys that you talked about in the previous recording was, Delzi, I didn't talk about business. We very rarely got into what I did. It's all about them. Can you share how important that is? Because I think that is huge, that I think most people miss.
Yeah, you know what? And Delzi, again, so what my goal is to get an appointment with the couple, the husband and wife. I would never give my official approach talk to one of them if there were 2 people whose lives would be impacted by the planning that we did. In truth, I always knew I wanted to get the woman because she's my decision maker, especially as I start disturbing on things. Let's say I disturb a guy, you, Delzi, and I say, what happens if you get sued and you lose it all? Your assets are titled horribly. You've left yourself very vulnerable. You lose it all. Your response, Delzi will say in his Joe Pesci language, he'll go, oh, as long as I have an 85-inch big screen TV and a futon, I'm good.
Amen. Amen.
A guy, that's their DNA. It's the hunter-gatherer DNA. That's why I know so much about psychology. He doesn't care if he loses it all. Okay? He's hardwired to go make it all over again. She's not. A woman wants to protect her assets for herself, her children, her grandchildren. She will move mountains and make him move mountains to make that happen. So I know who my buyer is, and it's not the guy. So it's pointless. I did a lot of business. I had 280 of the senior level executives of a Fortune 500 company. And so and 99% of them were men, but I would never do my approach talk with just them. I always made sure the wife was also in the meeting, because my disturbing tracks were going to bring her out of slumber. She was going to go like this, saying, we need to get this stuff taken care of. But I never had the luxury of just having them come in together. We're here. And that's not true. Maybe the last 5 or 10 years I did, but walking into a new town, all I could do, I had to get from point A to point B to point C. Point A is I meet them in a social situation. I ask them to lunch. That's point B. How do I get them from point B to point C, which is come to my office? So I came up with a technique. I describe it as my out to lunch bunch, where when we have lunch, all I do is focus on them. I spend an entire hour asking them about themselves. And I engage, there's a thing in psychology called the law of reciprocity. Now, I've had advisors go, you go to lunch and somehow you end up with a client. No, it's very intentional. One, I have to eat lunch anyways, but two, this was part of my prospecting technique. So if you and I went to lunch, Delzi, I'm going to ask all about you. Tell me what you do for fun. Where did you grow up? I'm going to know your story. I'm going to know about your mom and your dad. I'm going to know about your wife. I'm going to know about your kids. What are your favorite sports? Now, what's interesting, Delzi, is that what a gift that is, especially I know you as a wholesaler, you're always asking advisors about themselves, but I always ask advisors, when was the last time, every advisor on this call, I want to ask you this question. When was the last time somebody sat down over lunch, over any meal, over a cup of coffee, and spent an entire hour asking you about you? Chances are it's never happened. And again, my purpose in doing this is, and I'll give you some examples of how this worked out. It worked out every time, but some examples are, there's so many of them, but at one point, I thank you, Blake, you're reading my mind, but I guess the point of this is there's no downside to this methodology. And again, this is not just lunch, okay? You don't bring your pitch deck. You don't talk one thing about what you do. You talk all about them. And what's going to happen is the law of reciprocity will kick in. And at the end, they have to give you something in return. And the really cool thing is you get to decide what that is. So here's the outcomes. If you think they're qualified, or you determine they're qualified, you want to ask for the appointment. Because eventually they're going to realize they've been talking about themselves the whole time. Oh my gosh. Oh gosh, Delzi, you've been so kind. You've asked everything. So tell me about you, Delzi. Tell me what you do. Oh, I'm happy to tell you what I do. Why don't you come to my office next time, bring your wife, I'll show you everything I do. You have to do that for me, because I just gave you an hour to talk about yourself. Okay. And I can guarantee this is the outcomes. Okay. The next one is asked to be introduced to others via mutual introduction. Like the first time I did this, it was a girl that was working at the Chamber of Commerce. She's probably 23 years old. She certainly wasn't qualified to be my prospect, but she was behind the desk at the Chamber of Commerce. She knew every member of the chamber. And I said, so after I let her talk about herself for an entire hour, I finally said, tell me, who are the movers and shakers in town? Who do I need to get to know? Oh, you should probably know Bob the banker, John the doctor, Bill the attorney. Would you mind making an introduction? Oh, of course. In fact, I would go back to the office and I would email this person and say, this is what I want you to say as an introduction. So she would introduce me to Bob the banker, Joe the attorney, and I would then ask them to lunch, because the ask was easy. Let's have lunch. And if they say, what, did she try and give you the pitch? No, in fact, she never talked about her business at all. So again, what you do want is, if they're qualified, you want them to come to your office, and you want them to come together with their spouse. You get to ask for that and they say yes. You can ask for a speaking engagement. Let's say they belong to a club organization. They're in the Rotary, they're in Kiwanis, they're a part of a alumni association. Hey, do you guys have speakers? Yeah, I'd love to be a speaker at your organization sometime. Written about in a local publication. I'll tell that story in a second. Ask if you can put their name on your seminar, your webinar list. And then they might not be qualified, but they might work for somebody who's qualified. So those are the outcomes that I figured out over the years. And since I knew I had to eat lunch anyway, there was no point in, I guess there's a book out there, Never Eat Alone, or Never Eat, something like that. but it was magical. And again, when you're new in town and I don't have the benefit of being connected at the club or whatever, it was just one of 10 different ways that I prospected for my clients.
This is so cool because there's no out. There literally is no out when it comes to this. And you've given them an hour and they feel obligated. I hate to repeat this, but I think that's so cool because they're just like, oh my gosh, I just talked to about myself for an hour, and they feel selfish at that point. So they have to give back. So it's so funny that all of this comes around like psychology, disturbing tracks, and it's all, you have 22 different disturbing tracks. That's what I think is so cool about your program, is that there's nothing that you don't cover. And there's little secrets and tricks to, like, just little things like, don't ask them to bring anything. Don't bring statements. Don't bring, what do you need to know in the first appointment? That's what I think is the coolest thing, is because you actually ask for nothing.
Yeah. I need to know their names and the names and ages of their children. So that's all I need to do my approach talk.
That's it. You don't want to see investment statements. You don't want to see
investment statements are okay because I can easily disturb on those. But what I don't ever want their estate planning documents. So because I have a lot of disturbing tracks on the estate planning documents, and if they had sent them to me in advance, they would expect that I had read them and I would already know the answers to these questions.
So you use that not knowing as your disturbing tracks to go in and ask them questions that you could not know because you don't have the documents.
Correct. And the really cool thing is, it's been a while since they did their estate planning documents and they were fuzzy on it when they did. So it's really easy to disturb. I'll give you an example. My out to lunch bunch, I ended up meeting with the bookkeeper for a very famous Dallas cowboy. She had come to one of my seminars. I had no idea who she was. She invited me to lunch. I'm like, okay. So I found out who her boss was, the most famous Dallas cowboy that's ever been out there, but I signed an NDA, so I can't say who it is. And I focused on her. So tell me about you. Tell me what you do for fun. Tell me what your favorite. She was a rather large woman, so I assumed she liked to eat. So we talked a lot about food and where she liked to eat and what she liked to do. And she never once asked about me. Because especially knowing her situation, for somebody to take a true and abiding interest in her as a human being, she had never had that happen. Because of who she worked for, they just discounted her. And I knew that she probably assumed I would find out who she worked for. And she probably assumed that all I'd want to do is figure out a way for her to get an introduction to him. But knowing psychology as well as I do, and by the way, this is all learned over time, I don't have a degree in it, I just focused on her. And at the end of the conversation, she goes, I really think Joe and Pat could really benefit from your services. By the way, that's not their names. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, you don't know anything about me. And so she goes, I'd like to set up an appointment. So the next week or so, I'm sitting out in the parking lot in front of the office of the most famous Dallas cowboy ever. And I know this guy has like tons of advisors and attorneys and CPAs, and he's covered up. And all I'm thinking to myself, Delzi, by the way, at this point, I'm really well into my career. I'm very confident about my abilities, but I'm still sitting in front of this hero's office. And so I was shaking in my boots and I'm thinking to myself, this will be interesting. I'll probably be back in my car in 15 minutes, but it'll be interesting to see his office and meet him and stuff like that. 2.5 hours later, I came out with a new client because I knew my stuff. And the way I approach it, I just cast enough doubt in his mind that he wasn't sure that his other advisors had ever talked about that or addressed that or taken care of that. We probably need to work on that. And his wife, we need to get this stuff done. We need to make sure those kids are taken care of. She was my buyer. So the funny thing is I charge financial planning fees, and I wasn't ready for him to say, okay, what's it going to take? Meaning how much you're going to charge me to take care of this? And I wasn't exactly ready for it. So I looked over and he had his jersey on the wall. So I took the number on his jersey and I added 3 zeros. And I said, my annual financial planning fee is going to be $37,000. And he's done. Later on, as we talked, because we talked then for another hour, and he looked up, he goes, oh, I get it. I get it. He ended up becoming
Which wasn't really the number, right?
Yeah.
I just saw there's 2 questions here. And folks,
Okay.
if you have any questions, we're coming down to the top of the hour. So please, if you have any other questions, I think we've answered both of them. Can you see them?
Let me take a look.
The devil's in the details. How do you attract clients? I think you answered that. Seminars, direct mailers. You're out the lunch bunch.
So, okay, yeah, how did you attract client? I did use seminars. I did use direct mail. I did do out to lunch bunch. I did do drive-by shootings. I did do networking. I did 10 things. Every year I would decide what 3 things am I going to do this year? And because what I figured out is that all prospecting methods work. You just have to keep doing it. And the reason most advisors fail is they quit doing them too soon, or they do it incorrectly. And you really just can't buy this canned stuff that comes off the shelf and expect that's going to work. It just doesn't. But yeah, I know you want to ask me about my program. I'd love to share about that.
That's where I wanted to get to, because all of this stuff, like you got to be taught it. Like, it's not, unless you really know the business and you've been exposed to another advisor or mentor who's taught you this. I see very little advisors doing this type of stuff. Now, I have some very brilliant advisors, a lot of them, I should say, and they focus on, if it's not investments, it's more taxes. And you don't even like focusing on taxes. Again, the risk management side. So what are all these 22 disturbing tracks? What does the class teach these advisors? Because all I'm hearing is great success stories from, I've had a number of advisors who already joined your system over the last 3 months, because you and I talking and them joining the system, and they're like, it's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's really been good. I had an advisor who's been in business 32 years, and he sent me an email yesterday and said, this is your program is exemplary. He said, there's nothing out in the industry that compares, which is such an honor to hear from somebody he said, I've taken everything. There's nothing like your program. And that was really awesome. And I asked him, can you send that to the senior level people at your broker dealer? And he said he would. But let's talk about the next steps. So the program is a 6-month training program, and then you can stay on. The first 6 months, we call them fundamentals. And all you do is an online program. You sign up. If you just were to go to my site right now by yourself and sign up, my retail price is $10,000 for the course. But because you're here through Delzi, if you go up to, I'm going to give you a specific link, it's $39.99. Okay. He's got it up here. A lot of programs. I get a lot of people out of one particular program. They're paying $30,000 a year. And by the time they're finished, they're mad. They come to my program like, oh my gosh. So if you went straight off here, you pay $10,000. But because Delzi brought me in, and by the way, Delzi paid me to be here. And one thing that you need to do, you need to really pay attention to something called the law of reciprocity. Delzi has given you a gift with this training. Delzi has given you a gift with a 60% discount off of my training. You need to take Delzi out to lunch and say thank you. Delzi does a lot. Delzi, I took every wholesaler. I learned everything I ever knew practically from a wholesaler. I bought my wholesalers lunch. I picked their brain. I wanted to know what my competitors were doing.
Thank you.
Interestingly enough, this law of reciprocity, it works both ways, right? If you want to go out to prospects and you want to engage the law of reciprocity and have it work for you, you need to do it with the people on the other side. You need to engage Delzi and thank him for bringing the opportunity and the hugely discounted price on my course. So what happens is, if you go to erinbotsford.com/brighthouse right now, you can sign up. It's $39.99, and we have a payment plan. So if $39.99 is no, I don't want to do that, I think it's $1,000 a month for a couple months, and you can get in. What happens is you have open access to everything I know. It's 5 different courses over 6 months. If you can dedicate 1 to 2 hours a week, okay? So what you'll learn is he's got how to attract your ideal clients, and mostly I teach you how to move up market. I want you to start charging financial planning fees, because you cannot move up market and work with 20 or $30 million clients for free. You're just not credible. But I teach you the exact words so you can find them and then close them to become your clients. My claim to fame is being able to close a prospect of any size in your first meeting. And when I say your first meeting, it's that meeting you get with the husband and wife together at your office. When I'm out to lunch with one person, I'm not even going to try and close them. The only thing I want to do is engage the law of reciprocity so I can ask them to come to my office, and they have to say yes to me because I just gave them an hour to talk about themselves. I also talk to you about systems and processes and hiring a team to support you, because here's the thing, people. Someday, if you ever want to sell your company, if your company is completely dependent on you meeting with every single client, I'm here to tell you it's going to have very little value in the marketplace. companies like mine sell for very high multiples, very high. Companies where the advisor is just, he's the one doing it all, doing the paperwork, meeting with the clients. You'll be lucky if you get 1 times your EBITDA, maybe, yeah, 1.5. You could get 10 times EBITDA. And I teach you in the next 3 years how to hire people, get them trained to meet alone with your clients. Okay, that's where you want to get in the next 3 years. Now I have a lot of guys that have done it in 18 months. They're just flying by what I was able to do because I gave them the steps. You know what? There's no figuring it out. Even though I got to meet with Paul one day, I had to go back and I had to figure out. I knew where I wanted to go, but it took a lot of fits and starts to get there. The things that 75% of our students are closing faster. It's taking them a third less meeting. So I want them to close in 1 meeting. 84% have increased their net new assets per client. When they came to my program, the average was getting an average of $587,000. The average advisor gets $1 million. And 83% of them are now charging financial planning fees. Because if you want to move up market, you have to get there. And what I can do is I can tell you why you want to get there. I can tell you exactly the words to say. What happens is I send you, and you get an email from me every Monday. Because like how many times I bought a lot of coaching programs and training programs, especially in the area of fitness, because I get, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a bodybuilder. And I start off really great intentions. I'll take Memorial Day weekend and I'll study everything. But by Monday or Tuesday, I stop and then I forget where I left off. I don't want that to happen. Every single Monday, you're going to get an email from me and saying, this week, Delzi, I want you to study at a minimum this material. The idea is learn something and then apply it directly into your business right now. Do not wait. Okay, now you can move in the program. You can move as fast as you want. You can go through the whole program over this Memorial Day weekend if you wanted to. And a lot of my really fast starters, that's what they'll do. They'll blast through the material in a weekend, long weekend. It's 25, 30 hours of listening to my voice. But then they'll go, okay, now I want to go back and really focus here. This is what I need to work on right now. And then we get on a live call once a month, just like this. But the live calls, I'm going to really hone in on a principle that we teach in the course and a business building concept. And so then I answer, it's a 2-hour call every month. There might be 200 advisors on each call. And you get to you learn just by hearing other advisors' questions. And so what I found in the last 5 years since we've been doing this, the advisors, if they just show up for the calls, they're getting where they want to be.
Yeah.
Because what most advisors don't do is they don't take the time to work on their businesses. They're so busy in the business, doing the work of the business, they don't work on it. So going back, it's www.erinbotsford.com/Brighthouse to get that Brighthouse 60% off discount. And I can tell you, it is, especially, we talk about who's it for, a brand new advisor. We brought in a brand new advisor yesterday. She was sinking at a bank. And I said, oh my God, honey, if I look like you, I would want to be in this training program. And so she said, I want to learn quickly. I don't want to make all the mistakes that other people tell me that I'm going to have to make it in this business. So if you're a new advisor in the first 5 years, if you're an established advisor and you haven't made it past the $1 million mark, but you really want to, then you want to go to 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, definitely for you, because you figured some things out, but you're stuck someplace. Let's get you unstuck. Let's build you a business that'll get a 10x multiple when you're ready to sell. And then a veteran advisor, if you're within 5 to 10 years of trying to monetize your business, you definitely need this course. You need to know what it needs to look like for a suitor to come along. I had 3 offers on the table. They were vying against each other, and everybody kept increasing the price because they knew the business did not depend on me showing up. Within the last 7 to 10 years, the only time I came into the office was to meet with a prospect who had a net worth of 5 million or more. Otherwise, my business ran without me. I called myself the talent. When the talent was needed, I showed up. Otherwise, I played golf, pickleball, traveled, and I built a company that ran without my day-to-day involvement. And that's why I got such a high price for my firm. Anyway, any other questions on that, Delzi?
I want to give you guys a heads up because Erin agreed to do a 4th session with me because we started getting questions like, because Erin sold her practice. She was retired for 4 years before her clients even knew she retired, folks. Like that's how much the business ran itself. She was going to Africa for 6 months at a time. Her staff met the clients, right? That's the point. Now, again, Not all of you want to do that, right? You want to have a smaller practice. You don't want $1 billion AUM. We get that. But a lot of you on this call are 5 to 10 years away from selling your practice or passing the torch to your kids. So Erin has been kind enough to do a session on how to monetize your practice, how to get it ready to get the highest multiple when you are ready to exit, whether it is to your kids or your nephew or niece. I have a lot of that too, as well in my territory. But what she wants to do is share with you how to get to that point. And I think within the program, it actually, and I don't think, I know because I've seen the program, is that she teaches you everything like hiring and training and all the steps. Like you guys don't have to recreate anything. It's all done for you, like the manuals, everything. But I think what would be huge for Erin to share with us is how did she get the biggest multiple for her $1 billion practice? And I think, and whether it's $100 million practice, $50 million practice, I'm sure everyone wants to get the highest multiple. Or what are some steps of maybe piecemealing the sale of your practice? I've seen advisors do that as well. Erin, are you cool with that? You good with doing another session on passing the torch?
Okay.
So with that, folks, we are at the top of the hour. We started about 2 after and it's 11:01. I can't thank you guys enough for your time. Erin, thank you so much. Mike, Blake, thank you guys again for supporting all this. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, everybody call Delzi, buy him lunch.
Thank you, Erin.
Bye.
Lots of free lunches.